"Sir, this place is for paying guests, not bodyguards." Those were the first words out of the waiter's mouth. No welcome, no hello, just a cold wall built out of bias. What he didn't know: the man he just insulted owned the entire building, including his job. The revolving door of Maison du Loon spun with a quiet swoosh, ushering in a gust of cold November air. It was 7:38 p.m. on a Wednesday night, and the restaurant was in full swing. Soft jazz floated through the air, bouncing gently off marble floors and velvet walls. Dimly lit chandeliers cast golden glows over clinking wine glasses and polished silverware. This was a place where deals were sealed with foie gras, and eye contact was a currency of the powerful. That's when he walked in, towering, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a black hoodie and worn jeans. No cologne, no Rolex, no reservation. Just heavy boots, deep eyes, and the calm silence of someone used to commanding a room without needing to raise his voice. Michael Big Shack Lawson stepped past the final rotation of the door and took one slow look around. He wasn't there for the duck confit. He was there to watch point 3 weeks ago. Shack had purchased the restaurant in full, an all-cash acquisition as part of a quiet expansion into hospitality. He hadn't announced it publicly. Not yet. He wanted to observe first. Too many places built for the rich had rotten roots. Discrimination, arrogance, performative service. And this place, he'd heard, was no exception. And so, he came in like a test, in no suit. No assistant. Just him, the hoodie, and a history of being judged by the door. From behind the host's stand, Kyle Thompson spotted him immediately. Kyle was 26, clean-cut, and obsessed with aesthetic. He wore Maison du Loon like a costume. His crisp white shirt, slim black tie, and name tag gleamed as if they were badges of social superiority. He prided himself on protecting the vibe. So when a massive black man in a hoodie entered, Kyle moved fast. Before the hostess could speak, he was there, blocking the path. "Sir," he said, voice low but firm, "this place is for paying guests, not bodyguards. There's a diner 2 blocks south. You may have passed it on the way here." Shaq stopped in his tracks. His expression didn't shift. No anger, no shock, just stillness, like the wind just before a thunderstorm. "I'm not security," he replied quietly. "I'd like a table." Kyle blinked, realizing for the first time that the man wasn't with anyone. No earpiece. No celebrity trailing behind. "You want to dine here?" "Yes." Kyle exhaled a small scoff, straightened his cuffs. "We're reservation only, sir. Very exclusive. I doubt there's anything available." Behind him, the hostess, nervous, barely 20, whispered, "There's a 2-top open in the back near the kitchen." Kyle pretended not to hear her. "Unfortunately," he continued, "we're fully committed tonight." Shaq didn't move. "Is that so?" Kyle hesitated. Something about the man's stare was unnerving. He wasn't confrontational, but he wasn't backing down. The hostess cleared her throat again. "Kyle, really, there's a table free." Kyle gave her a side glance of annoyance, then turned back. "We might have something, sir, but it's not ideal. Loud. No view." "I'll take it." Kyle froze for half a second, thrown off by the directness. "Fine. Follow me." They passed rows of finely dressed guests, men in Italian blazers, women draped in diamonds. Some turned to look. A few furrowed their brows. Shaq heard murmurs. "Is he lost? Probably a driver. No way he's eating here dressed like that." He'd heard it all before. The carpet cushioned their steps as Kyle led him deeper into the restaurant. Waiters nodded politely to other patrons. No one acknowledged Shaq at the very back. Just past a pair of swinging kitchen doors and next to a wilting plant, Kyle gestured stiffly. "Here you go." Shaq looked at the chair, slightly wobbly, tucked into a smaller table with a scratched surface. It was the kind of table that said, "We didn't plan for you." But Saturday Kyle placed a single menu in front of him, creased, stained at the edge, then turned and walked away without another word. From this angle, Shaq could see the whole restaurant that he watched Kyle return to the front, where he greeted a couple in designer coats with a beaming smile and an open posture. He poured their wine with elegance, knees bent slightly in a performance of hospitality. He offered bread, asked about allergies, complimented their jewelry. To Shaq, he hadn't offered water. Not even eye contact. The busser walked by. Shaq raised a hand. "Excuse me, could I get a glass of still water?" The busser nodded quickly and disappeared into the kitchen. Shaq exhaled. He wasn't angry. He was fascinated. What Kyle didn't realize was that he was on stage, and the audience owned the theater. Shaq sat motionless, elbows resting gently on the edge of the table, his hands folded in front of the creased menu like a man attending a private memorial. The hum of clinking glassware, murmured conversation, and soft jazz seemed to fade around him. It was as though the restaurant had a force field, one that recognized certain appearances and silently rejected others. He had always known how people perceived him when he dressed down. He had tested it in boardrooms, boutiques, and now, in his own restaurant. But knowing something and feeling it in real time were different. This wasn't just a study in service. It was a study in dismissal. His water hadn't come. The busser had nodded politely 10 minutes earlier, but no one had returned. He looked around. Tables surrounding him bustled with energy. Servers leaned in, hands behind backs, describing each course like it was theater. Bread baskets flowed like clockwork. Sommeliers twirled wine with poetic language. Yet no one had made eye contact with Shaq in nearly 15 minutes. Kyle was laughing. He stood at table 4 with a charming couple, both in their 30s, draped in subtle designer wear and the confidence of privilege. The man wore a tailored gray blazer and vintage Rolex. The woman had a silk blouse that whispered old money and a diamond bracelet that caught candlelight. Kyle was mid-story about the time a B-list celebrity accidentally spilled a full bottle of Barolo. The guests chuckled. The woman looked across the restaurant briefly. "Who's the guy in the hoodie?" she asked. Kyle followed her gaze, then rolled his eyes. "No idea. Walk in. Probably wandered in off the street." Hostess was too nice to say no. The man raised an eyebrow. "You still get guys like that here?" "All the time," Kyle lied. "But don't worry. I gave him the corner seat. Closest thing we have to a broom closet." They all laughed, and Kyle dipped slightly in a mock bow. "Can I interest you in the chef's tasting menu this evening?" Shaq didn't need to hear the exact words. He could read body language better than most. A decade in corporate negotiations had taught him the art of perception. He watched how Kyle leaned into that table, how his eyes squinted just slightly during a joke. He saw the glance Kyle tossed toward him, followed by the exaggerated grin when he turned back to the couple. That wasn't just discomfort. That was deliberate exclusion. Shaq shifted slightly in his chair and let his eyes move across the room that he noticed the newer server, a girl with a short ponytail and anxious eyes, deliver bread to a table beside his. She hesitated when she saw him watching, then looked away. He noticed the manager at the far end of the room typing on a tablet. Pretending not to see him, he noticed how the music changed, moved from light piano to smooth jazz, as if the playlist knew the exact moment to remind everyone, "Relax. This is for people like you." Except it wasn't for him. Not tonight. Not yet. He finally opened the menu. The paper felt like it had been handled one too many times. While other diners had hardbound leather menus, his was laminated, worn at the corners, one side beginning to curl. The dishes were overpriced and undersold. He knew the markups, knew the suppliers. He had read the invoices last week when finalizing staff payroll. But seeing it now from this angle, on the receiving end of apathy, it was different. He noted the wine section. No one had offered him a list. No one had asked if he wanted a pairing. He glanced at a couple nearby and saw their server explain the difference between two Chardonnays like a tutor. He looked down again and smiled to himself. Interesting. Kyle finally returned, this time holding a notepad he hadn't used all night. "Sorry about the wait," he said, tone flat, without a hint of apology. "Are you ready to order?" Shaq glanced up. "No specials? No recommendations?" Kyle's eyebrow arched. "I assumed you knew what you wanted." Shaq nodded slowly. "I'll have the duck with truffle glaze, a glass of the Chateau Margaux 2015, and creme brulee." Kyle blinked. That combo alone was over $400. And he said it so casually. "Sure," Kyle replied, trying to keep his tone neutral. "We, don't typically serve the Margaux by the glass, though." Shaq tilted his head. "I'll take the bottle, then." Kyle scribbled with forced composure. "Very good, sir." As he walked away, Shaq could hear him mutter under his breath, "Hope his card clears." Shaq didn't flinch. He'd been disrespected before. By brokers who didn't know he owned the land. By bankers who assumed his credit score. By journalists who questioned his silence. But here, in his own restaurant, was a rare chance to see a microcosm of something larger. How people hide behind politeness to justify prejudice. And Kyle wasn't evil, that he was worse. Normal. The type who smiled while condescending. The type who made people feel out of place without ever raising his voice. Shaq's fingers tapped once on the table. Message received. The restaurant resumed its usual rhythm, at least for everyone else. Waiters whisked in and out of the kitchen with elegant flair, plates balanced on outstretched hands, whispers of yes, madam, and excellent choice, sir, trailing behind them like silk ribbons. From his corner, Shaq observed it all. He wasn't just watching people, he was watching habits. The habits of hierarchy, of subtle gatekeeping, of measuring worth not by wallet but by wardrobe. And so far, his test subjects were failing. Shaq's order had gone in nearly 20 minutes ago. No bread, no wine, not even an update. Just his table, tucked near the kitchen door, flickering with the occasional blast of fluorescent light each time the chefs shouted for pickups. Other diners were on their second courses, but him, still nothing to eye. In the back hallway between the wine rack and the kitchen cooler, Kyle leaned against the wall, laughing with a runner named Chris. I swear, man, he ordered the Margot like he was picking a soda, Kyle said, rolling his eyes. Duck, Margot Brulee. Full premium course. Chris whistled. You run his card already? Nah, I'm waiting. Pretty sure it's gonna bounce. Bet he's trying to flex on someone. Or maybe recording a social experiment for TikTok. Chris grinned. Bet you he's one of those gotcha YouTubers. Kyle laughed harder. If he is, I hope he caught how polite I've been. Man, I even offered him a menu. They both cackled, unaware of the quiet chaos they were fueling. Across the room, Emily, the youngest and newest server at Maison du Loon, watched Shaq. She'd noticed from the beginning how he'd been treated. She'd seen how Kyle had intercepted him at the entrance, how he'd been led to the worst table, and how the usual rituals of high-end service had been quietly skipped. It made her stomach twist. Her instincts screamed at her to do something. To walk over. To offer bread. To check in. But she was new. 3 weeks on the job. And Kyle had made it clear during training. We don't waste effort on one-and-don'ts. Still, she grabbed a bread basket and started toward Shaq's table. Halfway there, she stopped. Kyle had returned to the floor and spotted her. He tilted his head sharply, almost imperceptibly. A silent command. Don't. Emily hesitated, turned, and redirected the bread to another table. Shaq noticed. He noticed everything. At the far end of the room, the floor manager, Mr. Halbert, tapped notes into his iPad. He was supposed to be observing guest experiences, checking in, offering smiles and compliments. But he hadn't approached Shaq's table once. He hadn't even looked his way. Why? Because Shaq didn't fit the pattern. He didn't look like a man who'd post a 5-star review. He looked like a man who'd leave without tipping, or worse, complain. In Halbert's mind, effort was better spent elsewhere. Instead of managing, he avoided. And in doing so, he made the restaurant's biggest mistake worse. 40 minutes after ordering, Shaq's appetizer arrived. Not from Kyle, but from a food runner who barely slowed down. A small, ornate plate was slid in front of him. Duck breast with a truffle glaze, arranged with microgreens and a smear of beet puree. It looked good, technically perfect, but it wasn't hot. The duck was lukewarm. The glaze congealed slightly on one edge. It had waited too long under the past lamp. Shaq took one bite. Chewed slowly. The flavor was fine. The technique was sound. But the care was missing. The pride. In high-end dining, dishes weren't just food. They were performance. This was a missed cue. An empty gesture. He set his fork down and waited. 7 minutes later, Kyle arrived with the Margot. Well, he said, we were able to get you a glass after all. He placed it down without a coaster, without a tasting pour, without ceremony. He didn't mention vintage or notes. Didn't ask how the duck was. Didn't even pretend to care. Shaq swirled the wine gently. He knew this bottle. He'd bought it before, by the case. It was rich, structured, earthy with hints of blackberry and cigar box. A wine that deserved reverence. Instead, it was dumped on the table like a soda at a sports bar. He took a sip, let it settle, then smiled. Not at the wine, but at what was coming. Just as Kyle turned away, a woman in a sharp navy suit entered the restaurant. Slim, tall, with salt and pepper hair pulled into a tight bun, she scanned the room quickly. Her heels clicked against the floor like metronome ticks. Precise, sharp, undeniable. Shaq saw her. He gave a small nod. She walked past the host's stand, past Halbert, past Kyle. who blinked in confusion as she breezed by, straight to Shaq's table that he stood, shook her hand, and they spoke quietly for a moment. Then, she sat beside him. The room took notice. Back at the bar, Kyle watched the exchange. He tilted his head, squinting. Something shifted in his gut. That woman, she looked familiar. Not a regular guest. Not media.no. Someone corporate. He glanced at the manager, who was already moving across the floor. Too late. The woman in the navy blue suit sat down across from Shaq with the smooth authority of someone used to making decisions that affected thousands. Her posture was upright, her eyes sharp, and her presence turned heads. Even seated, she commanded attention. "Michael," she said, her voice low and controlled. "You weren't exaggerating." Shaq gave a slow nod, sipping the wine Kyle had just carelessly delivered. "You see it now," he replied. "Everything I was told, it's real." She folded her hands on the table. "I already saw 2 violations of corporate protocol just walking over here. No manager greeting. No sommelier. The wine was poured without presentation." Shaq raised an eyebrow. "And that's just surface." She leaned forward. "So what's the play?" Shaq's voice dropped into the same calm he used in board meetings. "We let them keep digging. Let them make it deeper." Meanwhile, Kyle was frozen near the podium. The woman, he still didn't know who she was, had walked past him like he didn't exist. And she didn't just greet the guy in the hoodie, she sat down. They shook hands, smiled. Something was wrong that he glanced at Halbert, who was making his way over, nervous energy in every step. The manager's tablet was now clutched in both hands like a shield. "Did you seat them together?" Halbert whispered harshly. "No." Kyle snapped. "She just walked in." Halbert blinked. "Do you know who she is?" Kyle shook his head. "Neither do I," Halbert muttered. And that's exactly the problem. Suddenly, the mood in the restaurant shifted. Guests began to notice the woman's presence. One man at the far table whispered, "That's Helena Ford, VP of Guest Experience for the national chain." Another said, "Isn't she, like, the boss of every manager east of the Mississippi?" Kyle's stomach dropped. He stepped back, his mind spinning. He remembered a staff memo from a month ago. Ford may visit undercover to evaluate service integrity. Could it be? He looked back toward the table. Shaq was laughing. Helena smiled as she took a bite of the appetizer that had just arrived, still lukewarm. She didn't flinch. She was collecting data, and Kyle had served them both, poorly. Halbert walked up to their table with his best smile. "Good evening, folks. I hope everything is to your satisfaction." Helena didn't look up from her plate. "It's been educational." Shaq chuckled softly. Halbert's grin tightened. "If there's anything we can improve," Shaq finally looked at him. "Start with training your staff to treat every guest with basic dignity. Might be a good place to begin." Halbert blanched. "Of course, sir. I'll speak with the server personally." Helena finally raised her eyes. "Actually, I'd like to address the entire staff," she said, folding her napkin neatly and standing up. Shaq followed suit. Halbert's mouth opened, but no words came out. That Helena's voice rang clear and confident across the dining room. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just one moment." The restaurant went silent. "I'm Helena Ford, Vice President of Guest Experience for the Maison Hospitality Group. I've just completed an impromptu service audit of this location." Gasps. Forks paused in midair. Phones were silently pulled out. Kyle felt his knees go weak. Helena continued. "What I've witnessed here tonight is an example of everything our brand stands against. Selective hospitality, class-based judgment, racial bias masked as reservation policy." She turned slowly. "One of your guests, who also happens to be the new majority stakeholder of this location, was profiled, disrespected, and dismissed repeatedly. And he sat through it without a word." Shaq stepped forward now. "Not because I'm weak," he said, "but because I wanted to see how deep the rot went." All eyes fell on Kyle. His lips parted as if to defend himself, but nothing came out. Halbert tried to salvage. "Miss Ford, I assure you, this was an isolated—" "No," she cut in sharply. "It wasn't. It's a pattern, enabled by silence, enforced by leadership." She turned to Shaq. "Your call, Mr. Lawson." Shaq's gaze swept the staff. "Every employee will be reevaluated," he said. "But some decisions are easy." He looked at Kyle. "You're done here." Kyle's shoulders sagged. "Wait, please. I didn't know." "That's the problem," Shaq replied. "You shouldn't have to know someone's title to respect them." The restaurant was still for a long moment. Then, From one corner, a guest clapped. Another joined. Soon the entire dining room was applauding, not just for justice, but for the courage to call it out. Live in a space built on quiet hierarchy. Shaq didn't bow. He didn't gloat. He nodded once to Helena, then turned back to his table. Dinner, finally, was ready to begin. The applause faded slowly, like the last raindrops after a storm. Kyle remained frozen near the service station, eyes darting between Shaq, Helena, and the stunned faces of the other diners. His breath came in shallow bursts. He'd been publicly humiliated. No, worse, exposed. Everything he built his restaurant persona on had just crumbled under the weight of a truth he had chosen not to see. The silence that followed Helena's declaration was heavier than any scream. Every waiter, busser, and runner stood stiffly in place, unsure whether to return to work or await judgment. Shaq sat down first, motioning to the seat across from him. "Let's finish the meal," he said calmly. Helena nodded, glancing once more at Kyle. "You should go." Kyle opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked away, shoulders tight with shame. The restaurant exhaled. Back in the kitchen, the tension hit like a thunderclap. "What just happened?" whispered one of the sous chefs. "Did Kyle just get fired in the dining room?" asked another. The line cook shrugged. "That guy must be somebody important." In the staff locker hallway, Emily sat on a bench near her apron hook, trembling. She had seen it all, and she had done nothing. She had known something was wrong from the moment Kyle intercepted Shaq at the door. She had almost brought him bread. Almost. Now she felt like she had helped bury the truth in silence. That night, after the last table was cleared and the final glass polished, Shaq asked Helena to gather the full team, front of house and back. The dining room was eerily quiet as the entire staff assembled, waiters in white, chefs in black, dishwashers still in soaked aprons. No one spoke. Kyle's absence hung in the air like smoke. Shaq stood at the center, still in his hoodie. "I'm not here to yell," he began, his voice steady. "I'm here because this place has potential. But what I saw tonight wasn't a staffing issue. It was a values issue." He looked across the faces. Respect isn't reserved for people in suits. Hospitality isn't just smiles for celebrities. It's how you treat the quiet guest, the solo diner, the man in a hoodie. No one moved. I could have walked out. I could have fired everyone quietly tomorrow. But I wanted you to see it play out. Then he paused. "But now, I want to hear from you." A long silence stretched, until Emily stepped forward. "I saw what was happening," she said, voice small but clear. "I wanted to help. I even grabbed a breadbasket. But Kyle stopped me. I was scared. I didn't want to lose my job." Shaq nodded. "Thank you for being honest." Helena stepped up beside him. "We don't punish truth here. We reward accountability." Emily lowered her gaze. "I failed the moment I stayed quiet." Shaq turned to the group. "She's not the only one. How many of you saw what was happening and did nothing?" Hands went up slowly. "Half the room. Maybe more." Shaq smiled faintly. "Then now you've got a second chance." Helena stepped forward now. "In the next 2 weeks," she said, "this location will undergo full retraining. Not just on etiquette or menu knowledge, but on empathy, on equity, on leadership." She walked slowly down the line of staff. "We're not asking you to be perfect. We're asking you to be better. Consistently. For everyone." Then she turned to Shaq. "And we'll need a new floor leader." Shaq scanned the team, then pointed to Emily. "Let her lead the floor. Temporary for now. Permanent if she earns it." Gasps. Emily blinked. "Me?" "You saw the problem," Shaq said. "Next time, I want you to stop it before it escalates." That's what leaders do. After the meeting, as staff returned to clean up, Emily stayed behind. "Mr. Lawson," she said, voice shaking. "Why me?" "Because you hesitated and regretted it," he replied. "That means you care. Most people don't even notice." Tears welled in her eyes. "I won't let you down." "I know." They shook hands. No cameras. No speeches. Just a moment of quiet transformation. The sun rose over the city of Chicago with a soft, golden glow. At 6:45 a.m., the kitchen lights at Maison du Loon flickered on for the first time under new leadership. Gone was the old air of quiet elitism. In its place, uncertainty, potential, and a strange sense of hope. Emily stood at the center of the dining room, clutching a clipboard with trembling fingers. Her crisp white shirt was freshly pressed, her apron tied perfectly. Yet nothing about her felt ready. 2 days ago, She was a new hire terrified of dropping a wine glass. Now, she was acting floor manager of one of the city's most prestigious restaurants. And the staff? Watching her every move. Shaq entered quietly through the service entrance in a hoodie today. He wore a charcoal sport coat, jeans, and clean sneakers. Still casual, but polished. A man who belonged not just to the boardroom, but to the people. Emily approached with a shaky smile. "Good morning, Mr. Lawson." He held up a hand. "It's Shaq. Titles don't run restaurants. People do." She exhaled a tiny breath of relief. "I've reviewed last night's customer reports," she said, flipping to the top of the clipboard. 4 tables rated service excellent. 1 reported a missing dessert, and 2 asked if Kyle was coming back. Shaq chuckled. "Let's hope not." They smiled. But beneath it, Emily still felt the weight. Later that morning, as the team set up the floor, murmurs began that a senior server named Mark, known for his old-school attitude and polished smile, leaned toward another waiter. "She's not management material," he whispered, eyeing Emily. "She's nervous. She freezes." "Shaq picked her," the other replied. "Yeah? Doesn't mean it was the right call." Emily overheard them. Her ears burned, but she didn't react. She wrote it down on a mental list she'd title later. "Things I'm going to earn, not expect." Helena walked past and whispered, "Keep walking. Don't let whispers define you." By 12:30 p.m., the dining room was bustling. Reservations filled quickly after the story of Shaq's ownership hit local news. People weren't just coming for Duck and Margot anymore. They were coming to witness the change. Emily approached table 12 with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Maison du Loon. Can I start you with still or sparkling?" The woman in the red suit glanced up. "I'll have a private conversation with the owner," she said, removing her sunglasses. "I'm a friend of Shaquille Lawson. Tell him Adrian Grant is here." Emily blinked. Adrian Grant, restaurant critic. Brutal, precise, and widely feared. Her column could make or break reputations. "I'll let him know," Emily said calmly. "May I bring you the wine list while you wait?" Adrian raised an eyebrow. "That's a good start." Back in the kitchen, the chef's voice boomed. "Who pulled the duck too early?" "It's rubber now." A young line cook flinched. "Sorry, chef. I thought, don't think." "Time it right." Shaq stood nearby, arms folded. He didn't speak. Just watched. Observed the tension, the stress, the perfectionism. Then he walked in, gently tapped the chef's shoulder. "Let's add a new station," he said. The chef turned. "For what?" "For recovery," Shaq replied. "Mistakes happen. Let's build a space to correct them before the plate hits the table." The chef looked stunned, then nodded. Back on the floor, table 7 spilled a glass of red wine. Emily rushed over with towels. One of the guests, an older man in a luxury suit, sighed exaggeratedly. "You're new, aren't you?" "I am," she said, "but I'm here to help." "Let's hope you're better at leadership than napkin folding," he muttered. Emily felt it, the sting, the embarrassment, the urge to cry, but she didn't flinch. She cleaned the spill, reset the table, and left without reacting to eye in the staff hallway. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Shaq found her moments later. "You good?" "I don't know if I can do this." "You already are." That evening, Adrian finished her meal. Emily brought the check herself. "Thank you for dining with us, Ms. Grant. Would you like to leave a note for Mr. Lawson?" Adrian stared at her. "No. I'll write something better. A headline." Emily froze. Adrian smirked. "Don't worry. It's not a hit piece." She stood up. "I've dined in restaurants with perfect lighting, flawless wine service, and robotic staff who smiled on cue. But today, I saw something better. Honesty. Real effort. Human leadership." Emily's eyes widened. Adrian continued. "One last thing. That wine pairing? Spot on. And that was your call." Emily almost didn't believe it. After close, Emily and Shaq sat at the bar. "You did it," Shaq said. "I didn't do it perfectly. No one does. You just have to do it purposefully." She sipped from a mug of chamomile tea. "Think I earned the title?" Shaq smiled. "You didn't just earn it. You redefined it." The next morning felt still. Shaq arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual. The streets were damp from an overnight rain, and the sun was just beginning to cut through the overcast skies. Maison du Loon stood quietly, its tall windows reflecting the city waking up around it. He walked through the back door into the staff area, greeted by the scent of fresh bread rising from the prep kitchen. The team was already at work. And it was working, slower, more thoughtful, but better that he liked what he saw. But even now, he knew something was coming. Progress always triggered resistance. At 8:17 a.m., Helena knocked on his office door, holding a tablet in her hand. Her expression was unreadable. "We have a situation," she said. Shaq looked up. "Talk to me." She turned the screen around. A social media post. A screenshot of an old lawsuit from nearly 8 years ago. A discrimination case, settled quietly, accusing Shaq's construction firm of allowing a foreman to treat Black and Latino workers unfairly. The caption read, "This the woke hero who fired a white waiter on camera?" It had gone viral. By mid-morning, local news had picked it up. Comment sections exploded. "Hypocrite. He plays victim until it's convenient. But he only fired the guy for show. They're just trying to look progressive to sell duck." Emily saw the story during her break. Her hands went cold. She looked across the room at Shaq, who sat calmly at a table, sipping coffee. People were watching him, again. But this time, not out of admiration. Out of doubt. In the staff meeting that afternoon, Shaq stood before them without a single note. "Yes," he said. "That lawsuit was real." Silence. "I wasn't on that job site. But it happened on my company's watch. And I settled it. Not because I had to, but because I believed the victims. Then I fired everyone involved, cleaned house, and rebuilt better." He looked around the room. "This isn't the first time I've stood in the fire, but I'll never run from it." Helena stood beside him. "We'll issue a statement," she said. "Clear, transparent, no PR spin." Shaq nodded. "Let the truth speak." That night, Emily found herself in the break room with a reporter waiting outside the kitchen, hoping to catch Shaq for a quote. She walked out instead. "Can I help you?" she asked. The man raised an eyebrow. "You work here." "I do. And you're not going to spin a hit piece while pretending you're chasing justice." He blinked. "You want to know who Shaq is?" "Ask the staff who stayed when things got hard. Ask the dishwasher he promoted. The cook he gave full benefits. The waitress. Me. He trusted when I didn't even trust myself." She didn't raise her voice, but her words cut through like a knife. Why the following morning, dozens of testimonials poured in online. Former employees, community leaders, even other restaurant owners. One by one, they shared stories about Shaq's quiet generosity, his second chances, his equity initiatives. The narrative shifted. News anchors revised their tone. Bloggers added updates. And the original poster deleted their tweet. Shaq never responded publicly. But he noticed who showed up. 3 days later, Shaq found Kyle waiting by the alley entrance. He didn't look defiant, that he looked lost. "I'm not here for my job," Kyle said. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I thought I was better than you. I thought I was being professional. But I was being small." Shaq didn't speak at first. Then, "What do you want, Kyle?" "Forgiveness," he said. Shaq studied him. "I believe in growth," he said. "But growth takes time. Come back in 6 months. If you've changed, we'll talk." Kyle nodded slowly, then walked away. That night, Emily stepped into the dining room and found Shaq alone at table 7, the one where it all began. She joined him. "Think we're past the worst of it?" she asked. "Maybe," he said. "But we're never past all of it." She smiled faintly. "Still glad you walked in that night?" He looked around, then back at her. "Every second."